Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Gonti, Canny, Acquisitor. Gonti says, spells you cast but don't own cost 1 less to cast, and then whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, look at the top card of that player's library, then exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So this is just some good old-fashioned Sultai Gonti theft. So why play Gonti? Sultai is the best theft colors in my opinion. Just black and blue are already the best theft colors, and then green adds rampant utility, which is really cool. Just having a cost reducer in your command zone is really good, and he also encourages fast games by swinging at multiple opponents just so you can, get like 3 cards a turn. Vulnerabilities, there aren't a ton of them. The issue with theft decks is that they're only as powerful as the deck we're going against, right? So if our opponents are playing weak decks, we're getting weak cards from them. So we kind of can't rely on them too much. Also, cards like Homeward Path are a vulnerability, but they're so far and few between. But yeah, really just not getting good things from our opponent's deck is the biggest weakness, because our deck is only as good as their deck is. Here's a game plan. We don't need Gonti, but he's pretty big. Like, he really helps. We have enough theft cards to get through without him, but he really does accelerate it a lot. So early game, we're going to play a lot of unblockable guys and get some ramp down. Mid game, we're going to want to play Gonti and attack with our unblockable guys at each opponent, so we get, the most cards, because it's only one per player. And then late game, we're going to cast our opponent's big spells. That's why it's important to ramp, just so we can get all of our big options. Here's channel stuff. The deck is about $4.75 at the making of the video. Take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of these cards were just spoiled like yesterday. So Gonti himself is listed as a $33 card, and in like a $40 precon. Come on, let's get real. Get the cards you need from TCG Player from my link down below. Helps me in the channel out. And then like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out too. Going into Planeswalkers, we have Tasha. Tasha, the main reason we're running her is because whenever you cast a spell you don't own, we make a 3/3 demon. That's pretty huge. Making a guy off what we're trying to do is great. We can draw a card for each opponent, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard, and put a page counter on it. Fine. Doesn't do anything right away, but we do draw a card. And then you may cast a spell from among cards in exile with a page counter on them without paying their mana cost. So that's pretty big too. If we're milling opponents, any kind of reanimator, or just them passively playing things and send a sorcery, they go to the grave anyway, we can at least get them back and then get a demon off of it. So going into our unblockable creatures, there's nothing too fancy about them. Like changing it doesn't matter that it has a changeling, it's just unblockable. Dimir Infiltrator is unblockable. But he's good because we can transmute him. And transmute is an old keyword from OG Ravnica. Discard it, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it, and then put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. We can only do it as a sorcery. It's basically, if we late game don't need a guy, we can filter him out for essentially a 3-drop. Then we have Grima, Saruman's Footman. Grima, they all can't be blocked, these guys. When he deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile instant or sorcery. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then that player puts the exiled cards, on the bottom in a random order. So he sneaks in for 1, and we get a guaranteed instant or sorcery. Plus, we also get the top card of their deck, because all of these guys are with the idea that Gonti's in play. Invisible Stalker's unblockable, and he has hexproof. Mercurial Spelldancer can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature, put a counter on it. And then it's kind of cool because whenever it deals combat damage, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. And then when we cast our next instant or sorcery, we can remove some oil counters and copy that spell. So we have like a big theft spell that's like an instant or sorcery. We kind of double it up, which is really cool. And then we have Slitherblade, which just can't be blocked. Our final 2 unblockable creatures are Suspicious Stowaway. Suspicious Stowaway can't be blocked. When it deals combat damage to the player, draw a card and then discard a card. The opposite side says it's basically the same thing, can't be blocked, but you don't discard a card. I don't like Day and Night that much. And then Trade Starblocker just can't be blocked. We're not really caring about the other effects. We just want them to not be blocked. So we have a couple ninjas in the deck too, just because when we have so many unblockable creatures, we want to be able to profit off of it. Fallen Shinobi has Ninjutsu. Ninjutsu is basically you do the old switcheroo with an unblocked creature. Our guards are unblockable, so it happens. When he deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. Thanks, Fallen Shinobi. Nashi Moon Sage's Scion, it's actually Tamio's like adopted son, little lore info. When he deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than, paying mana for it. So it's just free spells. Life is a resource. And then a new card, Orochi Soul Reaver. Snake Ninja Rogue with ninjutsu. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and manifest the top card of that player's library. So the idea is, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, that only works one player per combat, right? So that's why we want to have a lot of unblockable guys so we can be hitting each of our opponents. So in a vacuum, we have this guy and our unblockable guys. We manifest the top card of their deck, and we make a treasure. So that's 3 2/2s and then 3 treasure, which we then also assumingly have Gonti on the field to make it even more nuts. Going into the bulk of the creatures, those were the unblockable guys and the ninjas, but the bulk of them is Agent of Treachery. When he enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent, and then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. He's gross. You guys know him. You hate him. Even like a small theft deck, I know we're going to go off the top of our opponent's deck, but if they get something on the field we want, we're going to take it. Brain Sealer Dragon, flying 6/6 for 7. At the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of each opponent's library. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and then you can, cast of any mana of color, Whenever a non-land permanent an opponent controls, or an opponent owns, enters the battlefield under our control, they lose life equal to its mana value. If we have that in Gonti, that's a pretty fast clock. If we're just like, oh yeah, we took this 3-drop, like we're just bolting them in the face for passively doing it. And we also get cards for free with him anyways. Dalthy Voidwalker has Shadow. I thought about putting him in the unblockable section, but I thought he's more of a utility guy. If a card would go into an opponent's grave from anywhere, it's exiled instead. And then we can tap him and sacrifice him to choose a card exiled with him, and we can play it for free, which is good. We just get a free spell. Felix 5 Boots. Brand new card as of yesterday, April 4th, right? Menace Ward 2. If a creature you control dealing combat damage to a player causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It's another Monocon ability. The idea is we have Gonti on the field, we connect with one of our guys, now we get 2 cards from the top of their deck. That's pretty much all he does. And other cool stuff like Gix, whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, we pay a life. If you do, we'll draw a card, and then we'll pay 1 life to draw 2 cards. But Gix is cool because we can pay 7, bin our whole hand, exile the top X cards of the opponent's library, and we can play lands and spells without paying their mana cost. So it's another funny, steal spell, but we draw a lot of cards off of him because our guys are unblockable. Then we have OG Gonti, the Lord of Luxury. When he enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, put the rest. A lot of the steal stuff is just exile it face down, pay any color of mana for whatever, it's fine to cast it. But Gonti on top of that is also good because he has Death Touch, and Death Touch, honestly, a 2/3 with Death Touch basically says unblockable when he already has his ETB trigger happen. Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile another target artifact or creature, and then we can cast it. And any mana of any type can, be spent to cast it. Which is good. We just take a good thing we like. Even if it's just a Soul Ring, that's still pretty good. Opposition Agent I hate as a card. I really don't like it in Commander. I know it's very, very good in Commander, but in my head, it's so off the theme and the energy of Commander. I hate it. But it makes sense in this deck because it's a theft deck. Opposition Agent is a 3/2 for 3 with Flash. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find, and then you may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as a whatever. If it was a non-land card, I think this card would be a lot fair, but very often, you're just like, oh, I'll crack an Evolving Wilds or whatever, and now your opponent you ramp your opponent. But it makes sense in this deck just because we're a theft deck, so it's on theme. I don't know. That's my cope with it. Spark Double is really just to have another copy of new Gonti, the commander. Just so we have 2 of them. Or, I mean, really copying any of our creatures is still fine. Any of our ninjas, copying any of, like, hostage taker effects, it's still good. You know, you can't really go wrong. Thought Adele is not quite unblockable enough to be in the unblockable section, because it does have Island Walk. When she deals combat damage to a player, search that player's library for an artifact card, shuffle it, and you can play that card. Generally, you get a Soul Ring. Late game, you get like a Blightsteel, maybe. I don't know. You just get the best artifact they have, pretty much. It's good. Thief of Sanity deals combat damage to a player. Exile the top 3 cards of their... Look at the top 3 cards. Exile one of them. Put the rest in their grave, and you can cast that card in the whole theft mana of any kind. Thieving Varmint is a brand new card with Death Touch and Lifelink. Tap it, pay 1 life, add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this only to cast spells you don't own. Very crazy card. I think it's like one of the first mono black cards that net you mana, like creature ramp like that. It's weird, but it's on theme for the deck. Worst case, it's a 2 mana, 2/1 Death Touch Lifelink. Who wants to block that, right? And then finally, we have Xanathar Guild Kingpin. He's a legendary beholder. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose target opponent. Until end of turn, that player can't cast spells. You may look at the top card of their library anytime. You may play the top card of their library, and you may do the whole spend mana of any color, whatever. He's good. He shuts off an opponent for a turn on our turn. The only real issue I have with him is he costs 6, and then it's at the beginning of our upkeep, and he has no inherent protection, so he has to live. It's just kind of awkward. But if he does stick, we just kind of target whoever has the most interaction, and now they can't cast spells anymore. And we can play the top cards of their deck. Going into Sorceries, we have Acquire. Search target opponent's library for an artifact, put it into play under our control. We just get their best artifact. Again, worst case, you get a Soul Ring, and Acquire essentially just costs 3 mana. Or blue 1. And then we have Arcane Heist, brand new card. 4 mana, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost if it would be put into the graveyard. Exile it, but it has Cypher, which is an old mechanic. You may exile the spell as it resolves, encoded onto a creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, its controller may cast a copy of the encoded card, which is Arcane Heist, without paying its mana cost. So the idea is we put it on one of our unblockable... So here's how I look at it, right? 4 mana. We cast target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard. Cool. We then cipher it onto one of our unblockable guys. Then we attack. It's unblockable. It's going to connect. And then we do it again. The nice thing I do want to say real quick about our unblockable guys is, worst case, even if they die, they're only like 1 or 2 mana. So it's not really that big of a deal if they want to waste a kill spell on that. It's not great for us, but I mean, it's not too bad. Breach the Multiverse is huge. Each player mills 10. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Not from among the milled cards, just in the graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian whatever in addition to its other types. Doesn't matter. Fact of the matter is, each player mills 10. We are now effectively getting 4 permanents for 4 of the best permanents that were milled this way out of 40 cards. More than 40 cards. But even just in a vacuum, if no one has a grave. 40 cards. The 4 best permanents from among them. Pretty good. Bribery is just like Acquire, except you get a creature. You just get a creature. It's super good. It's great. We get the best creature in their deck for 5 mana. Cultivate. We're in a 3-color deck. We care about having a lot of mana. Because even Gonti and all of those, you may cast a spell from by paying mana of any color, right? We need to have lands to be able to do multiple things a turn. We don't just want to, attack with Gonti, play 1 card, and then pass. We want to be able to do multiple things a turn. We want to be able to do what we want on our main phase, attack, steal some cards, and then have more options main phase too. Cultivate and land ramp like that is necessary in the deck. Plus it's 3 colors, and it helps fix it. Extract Brain, X, blue, black. Target opponent chooses X cards from their hand. Look at those cards. You may cast a spell from among them without paying the mana cost. It's awkward. I'll say it's awkward because in theory, here's how I look at this. An opponent has 2 cards in hand, or an opponent has 3 cards in hand, right? Let's say you pay like 2. X is 2. They're probably not going to give you their best card. Worst case, they just show you lands and it's a whiff, right? That's the sketchy part about it. The best case is an opponent only has one card in their hand that they've been saving, and we just get rid of it, right? We just get rid of it, we play it, and we also just take a peek at their hand. It's awkward, I will say, but I think the upside of it can be really good just by being like, oh, cool, like I'll take your counter. Like, I don't know, it forces our opponent's hand in a way. Heartless Conscription is a brand new card with some spooky Gonti art in the back of it. 8 mana is huge. Exile all creatures. For each card exiled this way, you may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, spend any mana, the whole thing. Exile Heartless Conscription. And then Gonti says, history remembers the conquerors, not the bones they stand on, which is stone cold as hell. Kodama's Reach, same logic as Cultivate, except it's arcane. Doesn't matter. Mnemonic Betrayal. Crazy card. Exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, and you may spend mana of the whole thing, the whole mana of any type. At the beginning of the next end step, if those cards remain exiled, return them to their owner's graveyards, and then you exile Mnemonic Betrayal. This is good for late game. We're not casting this turn 3 at all. We're probably casting this turn like 7+ when opponents have full graves. Just being able to have access to all of our opponents' graves for a turn can be huge. Even if it's just like, oh man, I need a board wipe for 7. Like, it's awkward, but it is what it is. A bunch of good options with it. Nature's Lore, we just get a Triumph or a Shockland. That's pretty much it. Or alternatively, we just get a Forest untapped and it effectively costs 1 mana. Praetor's Grasp, search target opponent's library for a card, exile it face down. They shuffle, and then you do the whole, play it as any... Wait, you may look at that card and play it for as long as it remains exiled. Okay, I didn't notice this. Still really good, though. I would have put it in the deck regardless, because Praetor's Grasp is good. You have to be able to have the colors to cast it. If you just take like a mono red card, we can't cast mono red cards. We don't have access to that color. But either way, we're in Sultai, so just take whatever makes sense, or an artifact, or whatever. You're probably taking a counter spell or a kill spell anyways. Predator's Hour, I had no clue this card existed to the making of this deck. For 2 mana, nonetheless. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain Menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at that card and then do the whole mana of any color to cast this spell. We have a lot of unblockable guys, which they're getting through anyway. All of our guys that are now not unblockable have Menace, which is kind of unblockable. It at least makes it annoying. Some guys are getting through. So it's kind of like a one-time off Gonti's effect, except it can do multiple times because it's per creature, which is cool. 3 visits is Nature's Lore. You get a Shockland, Triumph, you get an Untapped Forest, and whatever, you get a mana. Whatever. Villainous Wealth is one of my favorite cards of all of Magic. It's Sultai X. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of spells with CMC X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. It's just, I like a big mana sink, And just being able to be like, all right, I'm going to pay 8 mana, give me the top 5 cards of your deck, like, for 5 or less. Like, that's still fine. That's most cards. But it gets, like, and it's cool because the more you pay into it, the better it gets, assuming it resolves. Hopefully it resolves. I mean, dies to removal argument, whatever. Assuming it resolves, it's pretty cool. Ignore Flotsam as an instant. Look at Jetsam as a sorcery. Jetsam is a 4 mana, and then 6 mana. Why am I saying 4? 4 colorless hybrid Dimir, whatever. Each opponent mills 3 cards. Then you may cast a spell from each opponent's grave without paying its mana cost, and then if that spell would be put in exile, or graveyard, it's put in exile. The fact that it makes each opponent mill 3, not a big deal, right? But at least if they have an empty grave, it gives us options. We just get the best thing from our opponent's graveyard. Just cast. It's like it's just spell, so it's instant, sorcery, creature, artifact, enchantment. Not lands. We get the best thing in their graveyard for each opponent. And it enables itself because it makes each opponent mill 3. So for 6 mana, we're getting 3 things, no matter what, which is awesome. Going into instants, it's not really crazy instants. It's just kind of Assassin's Trophy and Beast Within for just permanent removal, get rid of it. Counter spells, just so we have some interaction on the stack if someone does something we don't like. Cyclonic Rift, we get a lot of mana in this deck anyway, just because we have, you know, a lot of ramp and all that. So 7 just to bounce all of our opponent's stuff is fine. And then, wait. Let me reread this. Return target non-land permanent you don't control. Okay. Don't control is the word, because we do control them, we just don't own them. That's what I had a brain fart for. Heroic Intervention, just so if someone tries to nuke or kill whatever, we're just protected for a turn. Memory Plunder is a bit awkwardly costed because it's, you know, blue, 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 black, 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 whatever, hybrid Dimir. But you may cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost, which is interesting because it doesn't exile, which is kind of neat. Negate, counter target non-creature spell. I think Negate should get more play in Commander. It's just really good. It counters the majority of spells in Commander. So, Outrageous Robbery is kind of a worse version of Villainous Wealth. I mean, it's not. It's different. But black, black, X, target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down, and you may look at and play those cards, and the whole band of any color, tax, whatever. It's good to do as an instant. If like we're just kind of passing and we got like 5 mana open, like even just taking 3 cards from someone's deck, it's pretty good. Siphon Insight to look at the top 2 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, and look at the other, and then it has flashback. So it's just a quick little take a peek, get the best of the 2, and then do it again later. Going into artifacts, we don't have a ton. We have Arcane Signet just because it's good ramp. We have Dream Thief's Bandana, which is a brand new card. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at the top card of their library. Then exile it face down. For as long as it remains exiled, you may play it, spend mana, whatever. It's basically just Gonti's ability on an equipment. So it's good backup, so it's like, at least in an ideal situation, not even ideal, in a likely situation, we have Gonti and an unblockable guy, right? And Dream Thief's Bandana is equipped to that unblockable guy. We just get 2 cards from that player, rather than just 1. And if Gonti's dead, at least we still have a way to steal things. Lightning Greaves, toss it on Gonti, give him haste, give him Shroud, or just put it on something else, give it haste and Shroud so they can attack right away, especially if it's unblockable. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. You get mana. Sword of Feast and Famine. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and green, sure. But whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card and you untap all the lands we control. Here's why we run this card. Because we put it on an unblockable guy. We do whatever we want on our main phase 1. We play out mana rocks, we play some creatures, whatever. We attack with an unblockable guy, right? They're usually 1/1s. An opponent's going to take 3. Because not only is it pro black and green, but it's also unblockable. Then we're going to untap all of our lands. So in our main phase, after we just dealt damage to our opponents and we stole a couple cards from their deck, we now have untapped mana to cast it, which is good. Thrain Dynamo is great just because it's 4 mana and then it's 3 colorless. So it really only costs 1 if you want to girl math it in that way. But it's good because all of those spells that are like, oh yeah, you cast the spell with mana as though it mana of any color, like you're tapping down Soul Ring and Thrain Dynamo for colored mana essentially, which is really nice. Going into enchantments, we have Case of the Locked Hothouse. It's really just so we can play additional lands on each of our turn. That's why we're running it. Gonti allows us to play lands from the cards. A big thing I need to say, when we steal cards, depending on the card, that card is going to say you may play those cards or you may cast those cards. You can't cast lands. If it says you can cast that card, you can't play a land with it. If it says you may play those cards, you can cast it and play lands with them. So Gonti lets us play lands, and a bunch of other of them also let us play lands, right? So when we're going in, we're basically not missing land drops because, okay, quick math, a third of commander decks, or more than a third, usually 35 lands per deck, we attack in to 3 opponents. Each opponent has a 1 in 3 chance of them having a land on top of their deck. So we're essentially never missing our land drop, or we're having multiple land drops per turn, or 2 land drops per turn, which is good. To solve it, we have 7 or more lands, cool. And then if we do solve it, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast creatures and enchantments from the top of our deck, which is just a little added bonus, but we really just want the lands. Court of Lochween, 4 mana, where the Monarch adds Monarch to the game, which is always a fun mechanic. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you know the mana of any type. This is a play card, so you can play lands, but you know, that's one of the ones I was mentioning. But if you're the Monarch, until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with it without paying its mana cost. So that's the cool thing, right? So Court of Lochween, I mean, at the beginning of our upkeep, at the very worst, we're just exiling the top card of the library, and we can play it, right? At the very best, we're still the Monarch, and then we just cast that card. And it's not even that card, it's cards exiled with it. If we have Court of Lochween and we drop it on turn 4, and then we exile like Omniscience that costs like 10 mana or whatever, okay, we can't cast that. But if we're the Monarch, we're just casting that spell for free because it was exiled with Court of Lochween, which is cool. Cunning Rhetoric. Whenever an opponent attacks you or a Planeswalker, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. It's basically just incentive to not attack us, because if you attack us, we just get your card, which is fine. Exploration, just so we can play additional lands on each of our turns for exiling with Gonti. Mind's Dilation, whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast without paying its mana cost. It's a big enchantment that costs 7, which is annoying, but it gives us free spells, and it gets around timing restrictions. If an opponent casts, let's say, a creature, and then the top card of their deck is a sorcery, we can cast that sorcery on that player's turn, like right then and there, which is cool. Nature's Will, it's kind of the same idea as Feast and Famine. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat to a player, that player taps all the lands they control, and we untap all of our lands. The nice thing is, since we have a lot of guys and we plan on swinging out anyway to multiple opponents, we tap down all of our opponents' lands and we untap our lands just once. But still, it's still nice to untap our lands. The final 2 enchantments are Ristic Study. You love it, you hate it. You mostly hate it unless you're playing it, in which case you love it for more card draw. And then Rogue's Class. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at it for as long as it remains exiled, and then we pay 3 mana to give our creatures Menace, which is good, and then we pay 4 mana to be able to play those cards we then exiled with Rogue's Class. It doesn't do anything right away, but it gives us options for the future. Going into lands, we're just running all of the shock lands. We're running all of the vow lands, hunt lands, whatever you want to call them. We're running all the check lands just because they're good. We have a lot of basics. We're running all the battle bond lands because in a game of 4 players with 3 opponents, they're always entering untapped. And if they're entering tapped, then you're in a 1v1 and you're living. Going into the not, just dual lands, whatever. Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to you, but it taps for 2 colorless. We're trying to be a big mana deck, right? So just being able to tap for 2 colorless when we're casting these spells, it gets Gonti out faster. It makes all of our spells be a little bit easier to cast. It taps for 2 colorless, but the mana of any color clause, we get around it. So it's just good. 2 damage is pretty much nothing. Command Beacon, if Gonti dies too many times, just get him back in the hand for a 1-off. Command Tower taps for any color. Creeping Tar Pit, the deck is primarily blue and black. So it enters tapped, it taps for 1 of each, but it can also become a 3/2 black and blue elemental creature token that can't be blocked. So if we want to be able to sneak in damage, that's good. Opulent Palace with some Mothmen on it. It's just a Sultai land, taps for all our colors, it's fine. Strip Mine is honestly in the deck just to get rid of a homeward path. There's really no reason why, other than to get rid of a homeward path that we're terrified of. And then we have Zagoth Triumph, which is just the best Sultai land. All the Triumphs are the best lands of the 3 color. It's fetchable, it taps for each of the color, enters tapped, which is fine, and if we get it late game, we can cycle it away. Just for basics, we have 5 forests, 6 islands, and 6 swamps. I believe that totals us up to be about 36 lands or so. 35, 36 lands off the top of my head. Either way, that's fine. We have a lot of ramp, we're stealing our opponent's lands anyway, so it's good. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. Get the cards you need from the link below, and then remember to like the video, comment what you think of it, and subscribe. And also, tell me what decks you want to see next. Thanks you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.